Some deaths are peaceful. These are anything but. Prepare for 5 stories of some of the worst ways people have died that will haunt you long after you hear them. Driven by an insatiable desire to see what lay beyond the horizon, 14-year-old Keith Sapsford made a choice that would seal his fate. His desperate act of exploration ended in tragedy. A promising young boy from Sydney, full of life and energy, Keith vanished in February 1970 under mysterious circumstances. Little did he know, his final quest for adventure would be immortalized in one of the most chilling images ever captured. The bustling suburb of Randwick, New South Wales, was Keith's childhood playground. It was where memories were forged and dreams began to take shape. His father, Charles Sapsford, a university engineering lecturer, hoped their return from overseas would calm his son's growing restlessness. Instead, it only fueled Keith's hunger for more. According to his father, Keith often felt trapped by the routines of daily life. He struggled to adjust after their travels, his spirit unsettled, always searching. In desperation, his parents enrolled him at Boytown, a Roman Catholic facility in South Sydney. It promised guidance and community for troubled youth. But Keith's desire for freedom was too powerful. Within 2 weeks, he escaped. Alone, with steely determination, he made his way across the city. His destination? Sydney Airport. On February 22, 1970, Keith slipped onto the tarmac unnoticed. Security in those days was lax, and he seized his chance. He spotted a Douglas DC-8 bound for Tokyo. Drawn by the allure of the unknown, he crawled into the wheel well, a cramped, under-pressurized chamber meant only for landing gear. Clad in just a lightweight shirt and shorts, Keith braced against the biting cold, enduring the suffocating space. He likely had no idea of the dangers. Air thin enough to choke him, temperatures cold enough to freeze blood, and machinery waiting like silent assassins. As the plane ascended, reaching around 200 feet, the wheel well doors opened to retract the landing gear. In that moment, Keith lost his grip. He tumbled out, head first, arms flailing in desperation. Seconds later, he struck the ground. Keith Sapsford was dead. By chance, an amateur photographer named John Gilpin was testing his new camera. Unaware of what he had captured, he froze Keith's final moments in time. A week later, when he developed the film, he was horrified. The image revealed the boy's fatal fall, a haunting photograph that would forever mark Keith's story. Inside the wheel housing, investigators found evidence of Keith's final struggle. Handprints, footprints, fragments of his clothing. Each detail painted a vivid picture of his last hours. Experts agreed, even if Keith had not fallen, he would not have survived. Hypoxia, hypothermia, the brutal conditions of the wheel well would have claimed his life at altitude. Tragically, his father had warned him. Just months earlier, a Spanish boy had died attempting the same journey. But Keith's restlessness, his boundless curiosity, overpowered reason. It drove him toward a fatal choice. The photograph of Keith's fall remains one of the most chilling testaments to youthful recklessness and longing for freedom. On February 22, 1970, his fate was sealed in moments. His story endures as a reminder of the devastating consequences that can arise when curiosity, desperation, and youthful daring collide. A medical procedure that should have been uneventful became a catastrophic and agonizing experience for 27-year-old Yekaterina Fyejayeva. It ultimately claimed her life. Friends and loved ones remembered Yekaterina as a sweet and caring individual. Her gentle nature made her a beloved presence in their lives. A simple trip to the hospital in Ulyanovsk, Russia, was all Yekaterina expected. A standard operation meant to resolve her health issues. Instead, a devastating error would lead to an unbearable suffering and provoke outrage around the world. Yekaterina was diagnosed with ovarian cyst, a common condition among women. Often, it resolves without treatment, but sometimes surgery is required to prevent complications. Doctors recommended a laparoscopic procedure. Her family expected a swift and uneventful recovery. Yekaterina's life was filled with hope and promise. She shared a deep bond with her mother, Valentina Barishnikova, and her husband, Igor. No one foresaw the devastating turn of events that was about to unfold. During the procedure, a horrific blunder occurred. Medical staff fatally mistook formalin for saline solution. Formalin, a chemical used for embalming the dead, was administered directly into Yekaterina's veins. This toxic compound, about 37% formaldehyde, is designed to preserve bodies by destroying living tissue. Under no circumstance should it ever enter a human body. Soon after the surgery, Yekaterina's condition deteriorated rapidly. Her body contorted in agony, her limbs shook uncontrollably. Muscles convulsed despite layers of warm clothing and blankets. She vomited violently, doubling over in torment. The toxic fluid coursed through her veins, tearing her body apart from within. What made the nightmare worse was the shocking absence of medical care. No doctor came to check on her. Valentina's frantic appeals for help were dismissed. One staff member even told her to leave Yekaterina's side and go cook soup. The staff knew of their fatal mistake, but instead of telling the truth, they kept it concealed. For 14 agonizing hours, Yekaterina lay suffering. The poison ravaged her organs, each hour bringing her closer to collapse. Eventually, she was rushed to the ICU, but by then, her body was already shutting down. Multiple organ failure had set in. Her heart, lungs, and liver began to fail, leaving her dependent on a ventilator. Valentina discovered doctors whispering in hushed tones. They debated how to reveal the truth. When the chief doctor finally spoke, it was too late. A critical error had been made. At a regional clinic, the full horror was finally confirmed. Formalin had been mistaken for saline. The family was devastated. In a desperate bid to save her life, doctors administered 52 different medications. She was evacuated to a leading hospital in Moscow. Specialists from multiple fields fought to reverse the damage. For a moment, hope flickered. Yekaterina opened her eyes. She whispered a few faint words, but the spark faded quickly. Her weakened body could not recover. The poison had already done its work. In early April 2018, the clock stopped for Yekaterina Fadjiyeva. On April 7th, her friends and family gathered to mourn her. Valentina, consumed by grief and anger, rejected the official explanation of negligence. To her, it was nothing short of murder. Authorities launched a criminal investigation. The head doctor and several staff members were dismissed. The Russian Health Ministry described the event as a horrific tragedy. They promised support for the family and consequences for those responsible. The story shocked the world. Experts in toxicology and anatomy struggled to understand how such a mistake could ever be made. The effects of formalin are swift and catastrophic. Red blood cells rupture, oxygen delivery halts, organs corrode, and death follows. Yekaterina endured this process fully conscious for much of her ordeal. A routine procedure descended into a nightmare of suffering and death. In the end, her family was left broken and bereaved, and the world was left asking how such a tragedy could have happened. On the afternoon of February 25, 2022, 5 men set off into the calm waters off Trinidad's southern coast. It was supposed to be routine, a familiar task they had performed many times before. The divers had worked together for years. They trusted each other, forged by experience and resilience in a dangerous profession. But this day would not end as planned. Instead, it would become one of the most devastating industrial disasters in Caribbean history. The 5-man team consisted of Christopher Budrum, Kazim Ali Jr., Yusuf Henry, Faisal Kurban, and Rishi Nagasar. They worked for Land and Marine Contracting Services, LMCS, hired by Pariah Fuel Trading Company. Their mission? To conduct critical underwater repairs on a pipeline linking the Berth 6 and Berth 5 platforms off Pointe-à-Pierre. All 5 were seasoned professionals. They understood the hazards of deep-sea diving. They had the training. They had the skill. Before the dive, they posed for a quick photo on the boat, a casual moment that would later carry heartbreaking weight. At a depth of 18 meters, the men entered a pressurized underwater habitat. It was a chamber set around the leaking pipeline, designed to create a safe environment for the repair. Their task? Remove an inflatable plug that had been installed days earlier to stop the oil flow, a necessary step before repairs could continue. What they didn't know, draining the pipeline weeks before had created a dangerous pressure imbalance. The pipeline was now a ticking time bomb. As soon as the plug came out, the disaster struck. A massive vacuum ripped the line. Seawater exploded into the chamber, flooding the pipeline in an instant. The divers were caught in the surge. One after another, they were sucked violently into the pipe, their bodies battered, their lungs filled with oily water. They were dragged into darkness. Incredibly, they survived the initial onslaught. The men found themselves in an air pocket, battered, bleeding, but alive. Christopher somehow held on. Over 3 agonizing hours, he clawed his way through the pipe, fighting exhaustion and injury. Finally, he surfaced inside the chamber. His cries for help echoed until rescuers reached him. Christopher's survival was miraculous, but his words were desperate. His teammates were still alive, trapped deeper inside. They needed rescue. Inside the pipeline, the others clung to each other. They linked themselves in a human chain. They shared 2 oxygen tanks they had found. Step by step, they tried to inch along the air pocket, searching for escape. But their oxygen was dwindling, their strength fading, and the pipeline gave no clear path to safety. Despite Christopher's testimony, no rescue came. Pariah Fuel Trading Company halted all efforts, citing safety concerns. They refused to allow trained divers back inside. The trapped men were abandoned. Families begged. Experts warned. But the company held firm. Even critical equipment failed. A water pump cable snapped, further delaying efforts. By the time the action resumed, it was too late. On February 28th, the bodies of Ali, Henry, and Kurban were recovered. Days later, on March 3rd, Nagassar was found. Later evidence revealed the most haunting detail of all. All 5 divers had survived the initial accident. They had lived for hours inside the pipe. They prayed together. They comforted each other. One man clung to life for 39 hours before death finally claimed him. The government inquiry exposed several failures. There was no viable rescue plan, no calculation of the air supply the men would need. Pariah's actions were condemned as criminal negligence, corporate manslaughter. The terminal operations manager was singled out for inflexibility and lack of urgency. LMCS-2 was criticized for unsafe procedures, though investigators noted their hands were tied by Pariah's refusal to allow rescue. Yet, despite the findings, no one has been fully held accountable. The families remain uncompensated. Pariah and LMCS remain untouched by true justice. This tragedy in the waters off Trinidad still haunts the nation. It is a story of lives lost, not only to danger, but to negligence. A stark reminder of how avoidable mistakes can destroy families and leave questions that may never be answered. If you've made it this far, I'm guessing you don't want your name trending with pipeline disaster. Hit that like button and subscribe. May 22, 2011 was supposed to be a milestone day for 18-year-old Will Norton, a day to remember for a lifetime. Moments after walking out of Joplin High School with his diploma, Will was headed home with his dad. He was eager for what the future held. But as the skies darkened over Joplin, Missouri, a monstrous storm was forming, a storm that would claim Will's life and shatter the dreams of a bright future. Friends and family knew Will Norton as a warm, driven, and lively young man. Born to Mark and Trish Norton on August 19, 1992, Will was a cherished son and a loving brother to Sarah. His compassion, curiosity, and passion for storytelling were evident from a young age. He volunteered at the Humane Society, nurtured his love for film, and shared his creative spirit with the world. Will's YouTube channel showcased his talent and humor, opening doors to Chapman University's renowned film school. He was set to begin classes in the fall of 2011. For those who knew him, Will left an unforgettable impression, but the joy of graduation would be painfully short-lived. After the ceremony at Missouri Southern State University, Will and his father climbed into their Hummer H3. They wanted to beat the storm home. Just minutes earlier, Will's sister and aunt managed to reach safety, barely ahead of the storm's fury. Mark phoned Sarah, urging her to leave the garage door open, but the warning came too late. The EF5 tornado struck with catastrophic force. Winds exceeding 200 miles per hour tore through Joplin. Everything in its path was leveled. The SUV was overwhelmed. Windows shattered. The frame buckled. Mark held onto Will's legs with all his strength as the vehicle lifted. But then the seatbelt snapped. The tornado ripped Will through the sunroof, pulling him into the chaos above. Rescue teams later found Mark buried under the crushed SUV. He was badly injured, but alive. Will, however, was gone. A massive search began immediately. Family, friends, and volunteers combed the wreckage, searching fields, ponds, and rubble. Under the night sky, Will's aunt and uncle reached the mangled SUV. Inside, they found the remnants of his last moments, including his graduation cap. The community rallied online. A Facebook page, Help Find Will Norton, drew more than 50,000 followers within days. Rumors of hospital sightings fueled hope. Maybe, just maybe, Will had survived. But with each passing day, that hope dimmed. On May 27th, search teams finally found Will's body. It was discovered in a pond not far from the tornado's path. Debris had slowed the search, delaying the heartbreaking discovery. The news devastated the family and the city of Joplin. What had begun as a celebration of life ended in an unimaginable loss. With his body returned home, the family could finally lay Will to rest. Closure came, but the void remained. In the years that followed, Will's memory became a source of inspiration. Chapman University honored him on their student wall and held a memorial during freshman orientation week. Joplin High School launched a scholarship in his name, opening doors for students to follow their dreams. The Joplin Rotary Club and the Keller Williams Foundation built the Will Norton Miracle Field, a baseball park for children with special needs. Freeman Hospital created Will's Place, offering vital support for children facing mental health and behavioral issues. At home, Will's room remains untouched. His mismatched socks, green screen, and computer still rest exactly where he left them. For his father, visiting the room is both painful and comforting, a place where his son's presence lingers. Will Norton's name continues to shine in tributes, in scholarships, in fields of play, and in the hearts of all who knew him. A reminder of a life full of promise and the devastating power of nature that took him too soon. Marisa Weber was a dynamic and compassionate individual. Her life was enriched by literature, music, and a profound affection for animals. At the age of 38, she remained in the warmth of her family's Florida home, surrounded by love, surrounded by comfort, near her most beloved. Yet in late October 2006, Maurice's life took a tragic turn. She vanished, and what followed left scars that her family would never fully heal from. Marisa was born in Brooklyn, New York. In 1977, she moved with her family to Florida, making the Sunshine State her home. She excelled academically, an honor student with insatiable curiosity and sharp intellect. Her deepest passions were reading and history. As a young girl, she dreamed of becoming a teacher, a reflection of her love of learning and her wish to inspire others. Marisa's caring spirit and quick humor made her a beloved presence. Her devotion to family was unwavering. She even paused her own work to provide loving care for her ailing grandmother. She also carried a strong sense of civic duty. She voted in every election. For her, it was not just a right, but a responsibility. Music was another of her passions. Her love for rock ran deep, with Bono among her favorites. Her collection of music memorabilia was one of her treasures. In the hearts of those who knew her, Marisa's legacy was clear: kindness, laughter, sharp intellect, and an unquenchable enthusiasm for life. On October 28, 2006, Marisa returned home. She greeted her mother, and then she disappeared. When she didn't come back, her family grew worried. Hours turned to panic. They combed the neighborhood, filed a missing persons report, searched the house again and again, but Marisa was nowhere to be found. As days passed, a putrid smell began to spread through the house. The family believed it was rodents in the walls. 2 weeks of silence followed. No news, no answers, no resolution. On November 9th, the dreadful truth came to light. Marisa's sister Gina entered the bedroom. There, behind the massive bookcase, she saw it. A pale, lifeless foot protruding from the shadows. The beam of a flashlight confirmed their worst fear. Marisa's body was wedged upside down in the narrow space between the wall and the bookcase. Investigators pieced together what had happened. They believed Marisa had been trying to fix or adjust the TV plug behind the bookcase. It was something she and her sister had done before, by climbing onto the bureau and leaning over the heavy furniture. This time, she lost her balance. She fell headfirst into the cramped gap and became trapped, completely unable to free herself. Her mother later told the St. Petersburg Times, "I'm sleeping in the same house as her for 11 days, looking for her, and she's right in the bedroom." The autopsy revealed her cause of death: positional asphyxia. Her body had been locked in a position that prevented her from breathing. Toxicology also showed morphine, codeine, and prescription medications in her system. Authorities listed multi-drug intoxication as a contributing factor. But her mother, Connie Weber, strongly denied this. She insisted the report misrepresented her daughter's life. The state of the home complicated the search. Authorities described the house as severely cluttered. The bedroom was overcrowded with piles of clothing and trash. Animals were caged in different parts of the home. The stench of decomposition had been mistaken for dead animals in the walls. The most haunting question remained: had Marisa survived for some time in that narrow space, calling out before her final breath? The autopsy could not answer how long she had lived after the fall. But for her family, the thought of her suffering so close by, just feet from help, was unbearable. Marisa's life was cut short in a tragic accident, but her memory continues to thrive through the love of her family, through the laughter she shared, through the lives she touched. Her death left a void no words could fill, a chasm of sorrow that lingers still. Click on the next video to see more disturbing stories.